Welcome to a deep dive into some pretty big questions about reality and what it even means to be a person.
Really heavy stuff.
Yeah. We're looking at God's Dream by Max Reinhardt for this one.
Oh, good choice.
He kind of throws out there this idea that God is a dreamer and we are all just like characters in God's dream.
A pretty wild concept.
It is, and it really makes you think about, the nature of consciousness and free will and, are we really in control of our lives or...
Or are we just kind of going along for the ride?
Yeah, exactly.
Reinhardt's book is fascinating, though. It blends philosophy and spirituality in a way that's really accessible.
Definitely. And he starts by asking this question that I think we've all pondered at some point. How do we achieve a life of true happiness?
Right, like what is the key to that lasting sense of joy and contentment that we all seem to be searching for?
And his answer is pretty radical.
Yeah, he says it all comes down to understanding our true nature as something beyond our physical bodies and our constantly chattering minds.
So it's about looking past the surface level of who we think we are and asking that deeper question of,
who am I really?
Yeah.
Beyond the roles I play and the labels I wear.
Right. And Reinhardt argues that we're not actually our body-mind, but something more like the perceiver of our experiences.
It's like that classic saying, I think, therefore I am.
Yeah, and this is where he brings in that video game analogy, which I thought was really helpful.
Oh yeah, it's a great way to illustrate this concept.
So imagine you're playing a video game, right? You're not the character on the screen running around and battling enemies.
You're the player holding the controller, experiencing the game through that character.
Exactly. And just like in a video game, we can get so caught up in identifying with our character that we forget we're actually the player.
And that's where the suffering comes in, right? When we over-identify with our body and mind, we start to believe that we are all those thoughts and emotions and sensations.
And it creates this sense of separation and limitation.
Because we forget our true nature as the player, as that expansive consciousness that's experiencing it all.
It's like we're limiting ourselves to just one tiny aspect of who we really are.
And that's what leads to unhappiness, because we're constantly striving for things to be different or better, instead of just accepting the present moment as it is.
So if we're not our body-mind, who are we then? Reinhardt calls this our essential self.
Right. This is the part of us that's always present, the awareness that's behind all of our experiences.
It's not something you can see or touch.
It's more like that silent observer, the witness to everything that's happening.
He describes it as the perceiver of all perceptions, not the perceptions themselves.
I love the analogy he uses to explain this.
Oh, yeah. The sky and the clouds.
He says, imagine the vastness of the sky. Right, how clouds constantly form and dissipate within it.
But the sky itself remains unchanged.
Exactly.
Right.
Our essential self is like that sky. It's the constant, unchanging backdrop against which all of our thoughts and emotions and sensations come and go.
So even when I'm having a really bad day and everything feels chaotic and overwhelming,
that essential self is still there. It's like the eye of the storm, the calm center in the midst of all the turbulence.
So it's always accessible.
Always. If we just know how to tap into it.
That's a comforting thought. And here's where it gets even more mind-blowing. Reinhardt says that this essential self is actually the same in all beings.
Whether it's a human or an animal or even a plant.
We all share this same fundamental essence, this core of awareness.
It's like we're all connected at the deepest level imaginable.
Wow, that's a pretty radical idea.
It is. But it starts to make sense when you think about it from the perspective of God's dream.
Oh, yeah. So let's get into that. So you're saying the entire universe, everything we experience is all part of God's dream.
That's the central idea here. And I know it sounds a bit out there, but bear with me.
Oh, I'm all ears.
Think about it like this. When we dream at night, we create entire worlds, right? We populate them with characters.
And we experience a whole range of emotions just like in waking life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it all feels so real in the moment, even though we know it's just a dream.
But what if our waking life is also a dream? Just on a grander scale.
That's what Reinhardt is suggesting. He's saying that the universe is essentially God's dream, and we are all characters playing our roles on this cosmic stage.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So if we're all just characters in God's dream, what does it even mean for something to be real? Is the chair I'm sitting on just a figment of God's imagination?
It's a question that goes to the very heart of how we perceive reality.
And one that I'm not sure we can fully answer.
Maybe not. But Reinhardt argues that even matter itself is at its core a mental construct.
So even the physical world as we experience it is ultimately a manifestation of mind.
It's all part of the dream, a projection of consciousness.
Wow. That really shifts my perspective on things.
It does make you wonder what else we might be taking for granted as real.
But if we're all just characters in God's dream, what about free will? Do we have any say in how our lives unfold? Or are we just puppets dancing on strings?
That's the age-old question, isn't it? If God is dreaming everything, where does individual choice fit in?
Does our free will even exist?
Reinhardt suggests that while God, as the dreamer, have absolute free will, our individual will is a part of God's will.
So it's not like we're completely powerless, but our choices are always unfolding within the larger context of God's dream.
Exactly. It's like we're given a certain amount of freedom to move and express ourselves within a predetermined framework.
That's a tricky concept to grasp.
It is. But Reinhardt offers this great analogy from Norse mythology to help illustrate it.
Oh yeah, I remember reading about that, the Norns.
Yes. The Norns are these mythical beings who spin the threads of fate. They represent that grand overarching destiny that's being woven for all of us.
It's like a tapestry with all these individual threads intertwining to create a larger picture.
And each thread has its own unique pattern and color, representing the choices and experiences of each individual life.
But ultimately, those threads are being guided by the Norns, by this larger force that's beyond our control.
Exactly. So it's this interplay between fate and free will. It's like a dance where God leads and we follow.
But within that dance, we still have a certain degree of freedom to move and express ourselves.
It's a beautiful analogy, and I think it captures the essence of what Reinhardt is trying to convey.
Okay, I think I need a moment to process all of this.
It is a lot to take in.
This is deep stuff.
It is. But I think it's through this kind of deep contemplation that we can start to gain a clearer understanding of our place in the universe and the nature of our existence.
And that understanding, as we'll explore further, can be incredibly liberating.
Because it frees us from the limitations of our ego and allows us to tap into a deeper source of peace and joy.
I'm excited to dive deeper into that in our next segment.
Me too. This is just the beginning.
There's so much more to explore.
Definitely. We've only just scratched the surface of God's dream and all its implications.
So stay tuned, folks. We'll be back soon with more mind-bending insights.
And maybe even some answers.
Or at least more questions.
That's the beauty of it all.
Always learning, always growing.
That's the journey.
The never-ending deep dive.
I like that.
Okay, so we're all these characters in this cosmic dream, but where do we even start with, like, actually living a good life amidst all this?
Right. Like, how do we actually navigate this dream in a way that, brings us true happiness and fulfillment?
Yeah, what's the instruction manual for this whole God's dream thing?
Well, Reinhardt doesn't exactly give us step-by-step instructions, but he does emphasize this idea of living in accordance with truth, not fantasy.
Okay, so it's about, like, letting go of the illusions we cling to and facing reality as it is.
Exactly. It's about stripping away all the stories and beliefs that we've built up around ourselves and seeing things for what they truly are.
But in a world where everyone's got their own subjective perceptions, how do we even determine what's truly real?
Like, is truth just relative to each individual?
Right.
Well, Reinhardt makes this point, that truth is grounded in what's actually observable.
Okay, so it's not just about what we think or feel, but what we can actually see and experience in the world around us.
Exactly. He uses this example of square circle.
Square circle.
Yeah, it's a concept that exists as a phrase, but it's not a truth that's reflected in reality.
Right, you can't have a shape that's both a square and a circle at the same time.
It's inherently contradictory.
It exists as an idea, but not as a tangible thing.
Precisely. And Reinhardt argues that we do this all the time in our personal lives.
Like, we create these stories about ourselves and the world that aren't actually based in truth.
We tell ourselves things like, I'm not good enough, or I'll never be happy, or they don't really care about me.
And we start to believe those stories even if they're not actually true.
Right. And then we act based on those beliefs, which just perpetuates the cycle of suffering.
So instead of getting caught up in our own internal narratives, we should take a step back and ask ourselves,
What's actually true about this situation?
what evidence do I have to support this belief?
It's about challenging those assumptions and grounding ourselves in what we can actually observe.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do we start to do that?
Reinhardt emphasizes this practice of self-inquiry is a key to uncovering the truth.
Self-inquiry.
Yeah, it's about cultivating a deep awareness of our inner landscape, like our thoughts and feelings, beliefs and motivations.
So it's like turning the spotlight inwards and really examining what's going on inside our own minds.
Exactly. And Reinhardt provides a whole bunch of questions that we can ask ourselves to kind of shine a light on those hidden corners of our consciousness.
Like what kind of questions?
Well, there's ones like, can I choose what I think? Or where do my thoughts come from? Or who am I without my thoughts and feelings?
Wow, those are some deep questions.
They are, but they're designed to help us unravel the mysteries of our own minds.
It's so easy to just go through life on autopilot without ever really questioning the thoughts and beliefs that are running the show.
It is. We kind of take them for granted like they just appear out of nowhere.
But when we start to really pay attention to those thoughts, we can start to see how much they're shaping our experience of reality.
And how much suffering they're creating.
So by engaging in self-inquiry, we can start to free ourselves from the tyranny of those negative thought patterns.
Exactly. It's about becoming aware of the thoughts and then choosing whether or not we want to believe them.
It's about taking back control of our minds.
Reinhardt uses this great analogy of the mind as a glass of water.
Oh, I remember reading about that.
He says having a basic understanding of our true nature is like clarifying the top layer of water.
But to truly clear the mental clutter, we need to go deeper.
We need to stir things up and let the sediment at the bottom rise to the surface.
So it's not enough to just have a surface-level understanding of these concepts.
We need to actually do the work of self-exploration.
And that can be messy and uncomfortable at times.
It can. But it's through that process of digging deep that we start to see the ego for what it truly is.
An illusion.
A construct that we've created based on our past experiences and conditioning.
So the ego isn't really who we are.
It's just a story we tell ourselves.
And when we cling to that story, we create a lot of unnecessary suffering.
Reinhardt describes this process of dissolving the ego as a psychological death and rebirth.
That sounds intense.
It can be, but it's not a literal death.
It's more like a shedding of the old self, a transformation that emerges from deep self-awareness.
It's about letting go of the limiting beliefs and patterns that are holding us back.
And embracing a new way of being.
One that's rooted in truth and
Yep.
authenticity.
And this process of psychological death and rebirth is something that even Reinhardt himself went through.
Yeah, he talks about how the events of 2020 triggered a profound period of inner turmoil for him.
It was like his old belief systems crumbled, and he had to rebuild himself from the ground up.
He describes it as a time of intense emotional processing and a reorientation towards a deeper truth.
It's inspiring to hear that even someone who's written a book about these concepts still has to go through these periods of growth and transformation.
It shows that it's an ongoing journey.
It's a never-ending process of self-discovery.
Exactly. And it's a journey that's available to all of us.
So we've talked about the nature of reality, the illusion of the ego, and the importance of self-inquiry,
It's all starting to come together.
like different pieces of a puzzle.
And that puzzle ultimately points towards a deep and abiding sense of peace and fulfillment.
But to get there, we need to integrate both the inner and outer aspects of our lives.
We need to bridge that gap between our inner world of thoughts and feelings and our outer world of actions and relationships.
So how do we actually do that?
Well, Reinhardt emphasizes that this distinction between inner and outer is in many ways an illusion.
An illusion.
Yeah, he says both realms are ultimately modulations of consciousness.
They're both arising from that same source of awareness that we've been talking about.
He uses the analogy of a movie projector.
Oh, yeah. The projector represents our consciousness, and the images on the screen are our experiences, both inner and outer.
Exactly. They're both projections of the same source.
So it's not about neglecting one or the other, but about recognizing their interconnectedness.
Our inner world shapes our outer world and vice versa.
And when we can bridge that gap, when we can bring our inner awareness into our outer actions, we start to live with more intention
More authenticity.
and a deeper sense of alignment.
It's about living in integrity with who we truly are.
It makes me think about the importance of mindfulness, of bringing our full attention to each moment, whether we're meditating on a cushion or having a conversation with a friend.
Mindfulness is a key part of this process of integration.
It's about cultivating a present moment awareness of our thoughts, feelings, and sensations, both internal and external.
And it's through that awareness that we can start to make choices that are aligned with our true nature.
And create a life that's both meaningful and fulfilling.
Exactly.
Mm.
It all comes back to that essential self we talked about earlier.
The more we connect with that core of awareness, the more we can navigate life with clarity and purpose.
And the more we can experience the peace and joy that comes from living in alignment with truth.
So where does the meaning of life fit into all of this?
Does Reinhardt have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I'm curious to hear his perspective on that.
Well, he suggests that the meaning of life isn't something that's imposed on us from the outside.
It's not like there's this predetermined plan that we're all supposed to follow.
Right. He says it's something that we create through our choices and actions.
So it's about defining what matters to us and living in accordance with those values.
Exactly. It's about finding our own unique purpose and expressing it in the world.
So it's not about searching for some grand universal meaning.
It's about creating meaning in our own lives.
That's empowering.
It is. And Reinhardt challenges us to ask ourselves this powerful question.
What am I willing to die for?
It's a stark question, but it cuts to the core of what we truly value.
It's about identifying those core principles that guide our actions and choices.
The things that we're willing to stand up for, even in the face of adversity.
And it's through living in alignment with those values that we start to tap into a deeper sense of purpose.
A sense that our lives have meaning and significance beyond the fleeting pleasures and pains of everyday experience.
Wow, that's powerful.
It is, and it's something to really reflect on.
What are those things that we're truly passionate about?
What are we willing to dedicate our lives to?
Because when we find those things and we start living in alignment with them, that's when we truly come alive.
That's when we tap into the fullness of our being.
And experience the joy and fulfillment that comes from living a life of purpose.
It's a beautiful thing.
It is. And it's something that's available to all of us.
If we just have the courage to seek it out.
And the willingness to do the work.
The work of self-discovery.
The work of aligning our lives with truth.
The work of becoming who we were always meant to be.
That's a journey worth taking.
It is. And I'm grateful to be on this journey with you.
Me too.
Yeah.
This conversation has been so enriching.
I feel like we're just scratching the surface, though.
There's always more to explore.
Always more to discover.
About ourselves, about the universe, about the nature of reality.
It's a never-ending journey.
And that's what makes it so exciting.
Absolutely.
Wow, we have been through a lot.
Yeah, this is a lot to unpack.
So much about consciousness and reality.
And self-inquiry.
But what's the big takeaway here? Like, what does Reinhardt want us to walk away with from all of this?
I think it boils down to this. He wants to empower us.
Empower us.
He's offering this framework for understanding, ourselves and the universe in a way that leads to, more freedom, more joy.
More fulfillment.
Exactly.
Like he's saying, hey, life might be a dream, but you're not powerless.
Right. You have a choice in how you experience this dream.
And that brings us to one of the most fascinating concepts from the book.
Oh, yeah?
The idea of lucid wakefulness.
Oh, I love that one.
What is that all about?
Okay, so you know how in lucid dreaming,
you become aware that you're dreaming while you're still in the dream.
right, you're like, oh, wait, this is a dream.
That you're still experiencing it.
Yeah, lucid wakefulness is kind of like that, but applied to our waking lives.
So instead of just going through the motions, we're encouraged to see the world with fresh eyes.
Recognizing that everything we experience is ultimately a projection of consciousness.
So it's like waking up within the dream.
Exactly. It's about cultivating an awareness of the dreamlike nature of reality while we're awake.
It's like a shift in perspective.
A profound one.
And when we see the world through this lens of lucid wakefulness, what happens?
Well, I think it leads to a deeper sense of interconnectedness.
And compassion.
Because we start to recognize that we're all part of this same cosmic dream.
Harming another person is like harming ourselves.
Right. The illusion of separateness dissolves.
And it can lead to a more peaceful and harmonious way of being in the world.
Definitely.
But this brings up a question that I've been wrestling with.
What's that?
If we're all essentially God, as Reinhardt suggests, why is there so much suffering in the world?
Yeah, why would God dream a world filled with so much pain and conflict?
It doesn't seem very loving or compassionate.
It's a question that's puzzled, philosophers and theologians for centuries.
And I'm sure there's no easy answer.
No, but Reinhardt offers this perspective that maybe suffering is a necessary part of the evolutionary process.
So it's not that God is intentionally inflicting pain.
It's more like challenges and obstacles are inherent to the nature of existence.
It's part of the growth process.
And the book emphasizes that even though we can't control, the overall narrative of the dream,
we can choose how we respond to the events that unfold within it.
we have that power.
So it's about finding that balance between acceptance and responsibility.
Accepting what we can't control and taking ownership of our choices and actions.
That's where the practice of self-inquiry comes in again.
Right. It helps us detach from the drama of our thoughts and emotions.
And connect with the underlying reality of our experience.
Reinhardt encourages us to continually ask ourselves these questions like,
what is really happening right now?
or what is the truth of this moment?
These questions help us see things more clearly.
And make choices that are aligned with our highest good.
So it's like this constant process of waking up.
Within the dream.
And that's what this deep dive has been all about.
Helping you connect with your own innate wisdom.
Your own essential self.
The part of you that's always connected to the source.
And that's what ultimately empowers us to create a more beautiful and fulfilling dream.
For ourselves and for the world.
So as we wrap up this exploration of God's dream,
What are you taking away from this?
I'm left with a sense of hope and possibility,
Me too.
knowing that even though life might be a dream, we have the power to shape that dream
To wake up within it.
and create something truly extraordinary.
So what kind of dream do you want to create?
It's a question worth pondering.
And it's a journey worth taking.
Thanks for joining us on this mind-expanding adventure.
It's been a pleasure diving deep with you.
Until next time, keep dreaming, keep questioning, and keep waking up.
To the truth of who you really are.